Intramural leagues and sports competitions.
Okay, guys, we have a special guest here today. We have Matan from the Google development team, from the Flutter team, and he kindly accepted my invitation to come and talk to you about Flutter and Dart, about Flutter's future in Google, etc. So please give us a welcome to Matan, and he's gonna take off from here, and he will also take your questions. So while you have him here, you have to ask him the question because he knows it 10 times better than me. Okay?
I don't know about 10 times. Thank you. Hey, nice to meet all of you. I'm Matan. Let's jump in. Okay, so go.
Huh?
Oh wait, wrong. There's two screens.
Yeah,
don't look at that one. Okay, great. Hi, I'm Matan. This is my most Bay Area photo I could find in a short notice. I'm on GitHub, so basically everything I'm talking about today, if you want to stalk what I do 5 days a week, you could go there, I guess. I don't know why you want to do that. I've been at Google since 2014, so it was like my second job out of college, actually. I worked on Google Ads and AdWords, the really small things that Google does. It was actually the first user of Dart at Google, so I've used Dart before it was called Dart. We could talk about that if you want. I worked on Angular, so if you're familiar with the web framework Angular, I was a tech lead on that for a number of years. I worked on Google Play, so if you are going to be trying to upload an app to the Android Play Store, I worked on a small part of that, not successfully. I was managing and decided I hate managing, so that was a fun experience. And I've actually worked on Flutter since 2023, so I've worked there for almost becoming about 2 years. And I work on the Flutter engine team. So the part that makes all the pixels on the screen, not so much the widget part. So when you say I know you know a lot more than me, that might not be true. You actually might know more than me on some of the closer to the user layers.
Doesn't matter.
No, but cool. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about Dart. Dart's a really cool integral part of Flutter. So why did we pick Dart on the Flutter team? It was actually something we evaluated. What language should we use? Why Dart is kind of attractive for this kind of work. And a little bit about, not too deep, about Dart's type system. If you use something like Java or C++ or JavaScript or TypeScript, how is Dart different? Why is it different? And I'll talk a little bit about Flutter, right? So why Flutter? You could use a million other, I think literally a million other things, but why would you use Flutter? The tiniest bit of what is the tiniest, smallest first Flutter app and how does it work? And then I promised a bit about widgets. Why do we use the word widget over and over again? And what does that mean? And then some Q&A. You can just ask me pretty much anything. Okay, so by the way, if you have questions in the middle, you can also raise your hand like you normally do. I don't mind getting interrupted. People at my work interrupt me a lot more than all of you will, so that's totally fine. I'm going to show you some disturbing images, so I'm sorry. Dart is not Java. So if you're really, really used to Java from university courses, you'll find some things are similar, but it's not Java. It's different in meaningful ways. Dart's also not JavaScript. If you went into Google, people still use search engines these days, and typed in history of Dart, you might have heard that Dart at one point was going to replace JavaScript. That was an idea behind it. That's no longer the goal. It hasn't been the goal in many, many years. It has no connection to JavaScript other than some syntax that is similar or familiar. So a little bit about why Dart. Cool, so Dart's an open source, app-centric, you build apps with it, general purpose programming language. Dart is what's called ahead of time compiled. So we try to get you running on a device similar to if you were to compile something with C++ or any kind of other native tool. Meaning it's not interpreted, it's not compiled at runtime. When you actually go and do Flutter build, release, Flutter Dart compile, you are creating machine code that will later go on the device. That's really important because that's how your application starts up quickly and it has predictable performance. It runs similar every single time. You don't want to open up your phone and like sometimes it's fast and sometimes it's slow. That kind of sucks. But one thing kind of unique of Dart, you can also just-in-time compile it. What that means is there are ways to run Dart both on a device and on a command line where it is compiled as needed. And that actually becomes really important for fast development cycles. So when you're playing around with Dart and Flutter and you use hot reload, that's able to work because we're able to recompile the code in development mode over and over again. If you were strictly using something like Rust or C++, you couldn't. You'd have to recompile over and over again. Dart can do object allocation and garbage collection without locks. And another way of saying this is just like it is very, very fast, single-threaded language, similar to JavaScript. So it avoids lots of issues of like, how do I deal with this hash map and multiple threads reading and writing? You don't have to worry about that. It doesn't happen. I like that part. And something really important to me, you don't have to learn another declarative layout language. Dart is one of the folks that works on Dart, Bob Nystrom, who wrote a lot of the language. He's really important to him that you can write and declare your UIs in code. You don't have to learn another syntax. You don't have to install more plugins. And if you want to write your own UI system, you could also do it. We don't have anything secretive that we're using to do it that you can't do. I'll talk more about that in a second. Dart's also easy to learn. So it should look and feel like a lot of the languages you probably already know. It's not going to be groundbreaking. That is intent. And we're not trying to be groundbreaking here. So Dart looks something like this. This is like one of the most basic Dart programs. It looks a lot, again, like Java, JavaScript, C++. It's intentionally easy to look at. This prints hello world. It could do some cool things. So it has something called async await. This is a popular way of like doing sort of parallelizable code. So this would download something from weather.com, and if it was successful, print it, and otherwise print an error. It's very terse. It's again very approachable. Not a lot of magic. And of course, we have other cool features. So if you like things like pattern matching, or you had to take an OCaml course, or you're used to it in Ruby or whatever, we can do pattern matching. So you can say, oh, I have arguments, and I'm going to print different things based on the structure of this args variable. And of course, you can go even further than that. So this is a very, I would call it like typical program you might write in Java, JavaScript. This is not meant to be very Dart specific, right? So imagine we want to get a list of, we're going to go camping together, and we want to get a list of supplies. And we want to check the environment to see what we want, right? So we're always going to bring apples, because an apple a day. But we're going to bring extra water if the temperature is high. And anything that's already in the car that's small enough to bring with us, we're just going to add. This is a very silly program intentionally. You would write this code pretty much in any language. One of the nice things about Dart, and one thing I talked about having this whole UI as code concept, is that you can write it a lot more tersely and declaratively. So let me show you the same program similar to what you might do in Flutter. So this is just returning a single list. This is the exact same program as before. You may or may not like the syntax more, but it's a way to say, we're always going to return the apple. If the temperature is at least 80 degrees Fahrenheit, we're going to include water. And then we're going to iterate through all the elements in the car, and if they're small, include them. So reading this top to bottom, when you're doing like a widget tree in Flutter, can be really nice. You can use it in Dart. You can create your own system that do stuff like this.
Can I interrupt you one more thing?
Sure.
So where this comes very handy when you're developing your code is that you have, for example, a list that you're going to show on the screen. Depending on some list items available, not available, you can create that list dynamically with this if statement in the code without having to previously prepare it. So in the UI, you can put that. So this will come in handy when you are creating a column with number of objects, and then which ones to put in and not to put in. You can do with this short code like that. Sorry.
No, thank you. That's super useful. Of course, I talked about before, but a big element of this is something like hot reload. So being able to edit your code and instantly see what the difference is. We obviously find that very important. One of the nice approachable things about Dart and Flutter is often we go and sit with our UI designers next to them, and they code with us because it's not hard. They don't have to send us. I mean, you're going to use Figma and stuff. That stuff's great, but they can also sit with us and change the colors and instantly see what it looks like. And that's been a very approachable way to learn about UIs. We use the word batteries included a lot, and I'll talk about what we mean by that. So language and libraries. We have asynchronous programming. I showed you a little bit of async await with very, very briefly with downloading that weather bit that's built in. If you're used to all these kind of collection classes like from java.util or std and C++, map sets and queues, you're not going to go have to find a library that works and get it working and see if you like it. The stuff's included. Things like FFI, being able to talk to C code, being able to talk to JavaScript code, interoperability is built in. So if you want to reuse code from other platforms, that's also built in. And of course, we provide others as packages. You're going to be using a lot of packages as part of your work this class, but we provide some, right? We provide a test runner, package test. We provide package HTTP, which is a cross-platform, downloading stuff from the web. And we do the same thing with tools. So hopefully, the one thing you'll like about Flutter and Dart is that you don't have to go on like 12 different web pages and download, oh, this is the IDE, and this is the analyzer, and this is the linter, and this is the formatter, and oops, those two aren't compatible together. We also try to include static analysis tooling built in. Being able to compile to different platforms built in. Being able to format your code automatically without having to worry about where the curly brace goes and how much indentation that's built in. We have a package manager, so you can go look and see what other code people publish to reuse. You can do code snippets. There's IDE support for IntelliJ and VS Code. I've seen people do stuff with Emacs and Vim. You can pretty much do anything you want. And all that's kind of built in. That's all part of the Dart SDK. You don't have to go find a bunch of different things and kind of glue them together. More on batteries included. I use the word like easy to understand semantics. Some of this may or may not make particular sense depending on what your background is, but I'll try to give some examples. Who here has written lots of JavaScript code or any JavaScript code? A little bit. Can you tell me when you use triple equals and when you use double equals?
When you want to be literally with the type, or
Yeah.
otherwise it will be everything will be string comparisons, I believe.
Awesome. I don't have a cookie, but you get one.
Okay.
There's all of these like little gotchas in languages, right? So JavaScript has those. Java has like dot equals, and if you use equals equals and not dot equals, in some cases you'll get effects you don't understand. So we don't have that. We just have plain double equals. You have to kind of understand how the underlying object works. There's some neat syntax like cascades. So if you want to call repeated methods on the same object over and over again, there's a built-in syntax for it. There's things like arrow members, being able to write very short, terse functions that return stuff. More similar in like functional programming languages. Null-aware operators. This is like one of my favorite. You no longer have to write if foo not equals null. Like this basically says if foo is not null, call bar. And there's other syntax that extends on this and makes it better. Some other modern language features. Who likes writing the word new over and over and over again? I don't like doing it. I don't think it provides value for me. It's not C++ where you're actually allocating memory in the same way. So it's optional. And when you look at all the Flutter code, you won't see the word new in most of our tutorials or examples. Optional and named parameters. So I'll be giving you like a very descriptive, you'll see this in Flutter a lot, being able to write these big widget constructors that take many different things and not having to do a bunch of different constructors. That it's very flexible. And we'll talk a little bit about the type system, but like a modern static type system with things like generics and type inference and type promotion. What this all comes down to is repeating yourself a lot less. We're trying to make it so you don't have to like repeat yourself over and over again as you're trying to declare whatever you're doing. I'll talk a little bit about Dart's type system. I know this is not a type system theory class, but I find this kind of interesting. Dart has a static, sound, nominal, and null safe type system. All four of these were not true 10 years ago. I think every like 2.5 years we've added one of these parts, which is a bit of a fun process. So I'll talk about those individual parts. All right, so static type system, probably the easiest to explain because you've all viewed static type systems. This is a very simple program. It takes a list of string. You'll get a compilation error if you try to assign it to an int. You can't. A string and an int are not compatible. Cool. Kind of basics of a type system. Sound. There's a very strict academic definition of sound that you can look up. I'm going to give you a shorter one. The type cannot lie. So if we ever say something is a certain type, it is that type. It cannot pretend to be another type. So a very simple example of this is my name, Matan. If you try casting this, it will fail at runtime. It will not run. This is different than something like, for example, TypeScript, where the types kind of are just, they're there for fun. You can cast in weird ways. You can get an object that's a string that's actually 5. That will not happen here. Extending on that a little bit, maybe a better example. This is a little more complicated. You get a list of strings. So again, my name. You can do something called a downcast, right? You can, because a string is an object, you can say it's a list of object. In other languages like Java, you can do this. You can actually take your array of your list of string, turn it into a list of object, and add a number to it. In Dart, this will be a runtime error. It will say that, hey, integer is not a string. So when you get a list of string, you know it's always a list of strings. It's not a list of strings or maybe other things and I need to check them. We'll check them. Another thing kind of cool is a nominal type system. That means the names, the explicit declarations matter. So I'm going to give you an example. This is in TypeScript, which we have not written. Totally fine, very simple language. This is two interfaces. We have interface food and interface poison. They both have one field called amount, which is an integer. I guess actually a number. I messed up my TypeScript. Imagine you have a function called example. You can give poison. You can poison your example, right? Because they're structurally the same. They both have one member, which is called amount, that is a number. Something like this would never happen in Dart. So if you have the same code, two abstract classes, food and poison, you get an error because, of course, poison is not a subtype of food. All of these things are not going to matter on a day-to-day basis, right? But this basically means when you write your code and it's running well, you know that it keeps running well and you know kind of how it will work, which is really important when you're writing these bigger apps or using other people's code. One more thing, null safe. People call null the billion-dollar mistake. It's probably like in today's money, like $1 trillion, I'm guessing. Null is really useful, right? Null means the omission of something. But null is we think null is useful when you meant it for it to be null. Not everything should be nullable, right? So in this particular example, again, my name, you cannot assign it to null. You can't. So if you get a string, not only is it a string, but it is not null. And I know that sounds like very trivial, but that's not how Java works. That's not how many other languages work, right? But of course you can say it's fine. So in this case, I made it a nullable string or string question mark. That's okay. So you can imagine having like an optional, you're going to have a lot of forms and fields in your app. You might have some things that are not required. Maybe null is okay. But if something is required and there always is a value, it's not going to be null. It's not going to be nullable. One more example of this, again, like extension of sound. Imagine you had a function called getAge that returns an integer. The result you get is always going to be an integer, right? It's never going to be null. It's of course also not going to be a string. I know that was a rapid Dart introduction.
Maybe if you
Yeah.
guys have any questions about Dart before Matan moves to Flutter?
So you said that it had a ahead of time compilation, and it. So I just wanted to ask, like, is it more like is it similar to like a scripting language that it just runs line by line, or is the whole thing compiled and runs in the app all at once, like Java?
Yeah, good question. Historically, the answer was different. So historically, Dart was written to be a scripting language, more similar to talking about. As it pivoted more into like making apps, especially mobile apps where like CPUs typically aren't very powerful, you don't want to burn a bunch of battery doing compilation of scripts or interpreting things. We now have a full ahead of time compiler that does similar to things that what a normal native language would use, right? So it actually compiles down to, if you're running on an ARM processor, like if you have like an M1 MacBook, it compiles down to that architecture, and that architecture runs, or x64 or whatever your thing is. So it is ahead of time compiled, but one thing that gives us a benefit is that we also support non-ahead of time compiled mode in places that you don't want it, or if you want to be able to do things like hot reload, which obviously don't make sense with compiled. Good question.
All right. Any other? No?
If you think of something, it's totally fine to ask after. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about Flutter. I don't want to obviously you're going to be doing your whole class about it, so I'm not going to teach you everything. I'll talk about the basics. And I had promised your professor I was going to bring Flutter swag, and we recently moved buildings, and all the boxes were moved, and I had no idea. So tell you what I'll do. I'd actually love to come back and see the apps when they get closer. So if I can come if I can come a second time, I'll come with some swag.
Always welcome.
Yeah, please, please.
So we're gonna hold Matan to it to bring swag for you guys. Flutter swag.
I felt guilty, so I'll come again. I live pretty close by. Okay, so why Flutter? Why is this class in Flutter? Why are people using Flutter? I'm not a marketing person, by the way. This is just my own thoughts. So Flutter is the world's most used multi-platform SDK. I don't know how we calculate that, so don't ask me details. But I've been told this is true, and it anecdotally seems true-ish. So that's what I'm going to put on the slides. It's definitely very, very popular. Some customers include Google, yeah, very cool. eBay, BMW. So if you have a newer model BMW or hope to get one, the app is in Flutter. Toyota. This is actually kind of cool. The Toyota infotainment system is in Flutter on the newer models, so not just the app, but the actual infotainment system. Philips Hue, those lights you can change colors, the app's in Flutter. Sonos. The press is not great on this one. All the problems with the app are something not to do with that. I'm just kidding. I think that they have released a new app and it isn't working great. But I don't think it's Sonos is a big customer of Flutter. Samsung and WebOS, so the Samsung TVs running all of those apps are slowly becoming Flutterized. That's pretty cool. And obviously a ton more. I can't include everything on the slide. So big customers, whole bunch of industries. Something that we've personally seen, and I've seen data for this, is teams using Flutter often report that they are 2 to 3 times more productive than writing equivalent code in like Swift UI and Xcode or writing Android code. And that's not because those frameworks are bad, but that's because we made a lot of decisions to make it really easy to get started, and as you'll probably see, and because we're able to do something called having platform parity. So if some of you have, I see some of you have Mac, some of you have not Mac devices, we're hoping you'll have very similar or equivalent experiences across Android, iOS, web, desktop, without having to rewrite your code over and over again or translate it. We talked a little bit about this, but high performance rendering and AOT compiled code, we don't want to burn your phone's battery doing compilation. We'll do that on your computer or in the cloud somewhere, not on the phone. This is really important to me, a huge ready-to-use component library. Again, we don't want you to have to go search for a button widget or a calendar widget or anything else. Almost every widget you can think of, at least for the basics, is included with the framework. And then a huge ecosystem of plugins, testing solutions, etc. So again, I'm hoping when you're all building your apps, you might have to do some custom stuff, but I'm hoping a lot of the core things that you want to do already are available and working and you can just use them. That kind of ties in with our mantra of being productive and getting things done. Okay, this is the most basic Flutter app that I could write on a slide, which is really hard, by the way. But there's 2 parts. So left-hand side is your main function. Remember before I did print hello world? Okay, cool, now I'm writing run app. And this is a very, very simple app. This is a full application on the right. It's going to use some of the features that I talked about previously, right? It uses named arguments. It uses optional new and Dart. So this actually, if I were to render it and show it to you, would show a blank app with a title bar that says Hello World with some default colors that you can change. The fact that your first app can be, I don't know, 12 lines of code and like virtually no configuration, hopefully like inspires, like it's not hard to get started. This is how everyone gets started. Okay, so here on the left-hand side, right-hand side, you're gonna see we start having classes and we start extending things, and like I'll talk a little bit about it. What is a widget? You're gonna hear the word widget used a lot with Flutter. I know the word widget literally means like whatever you want it to mean. That's kind of the point of the word. But for widget in Flutter means part of your app, part of the visual part of your app. So let me give you some more examples. So widgets are the building blocks of Flutter, right? You're going to be composing and adding multiple widgets. So whenever you see the word widget, you can kind of in your head think it's a declarative part of the user interface, right? It's a button, but it's also an app. It's a form, but it's also a credit card field. Anything that's a visual component of your app that can kind of be composed together. Widgets form a hierarchy based on composition. So if you want to create someone on your, I don't know if you create a widget called like a credit card input. And now you decide that you want to create a whole thing that takes what type of credit card, the expiration date, etc. You can compose and create bigger widgets that are built of smaller widgets and then reuse that code wherever you want. That's the basic idea of a widget and widget composition. Each widget is inside of a parent and receives context from the parent. So the widget is aware of where it is. And then again, like I said, widgets are typically composed of many other small single-purpose widgets. So when you install Android Studio or VS Code or whatever you end up using, one fun thing is when you start using one of our widgets, like Material Button and Material App, hold down Control or whatever it is on your device and click on Material App or click on Material Button. You're actually going to see that we don't have a secret syntax that we use that you don't have. Our own widgets are built of widgets. And you can actually see what those are and how we did it. And there's usually lots of comments. It's quite nice. So like I said, almost everything is a widget. So if you wanted to create a custom widget yourself called padded text, this is a very simple example of a widget you'd write yourself, right? So it has padding, which puts padding around the element. And then it has text, which says hello world. This is obviously a very basic, not customizable widget. But this is the bare bones example of how you can create sort of composite widgets made of multiple things, and you can combine things and share code in interesting ways. Widgets can also have state. You're going to hear the word state talked about a lot. There's a thought that your entire UI, meaning what you see on your phone or your device, is a function of UI equals some function, state. Meaning whatever your app has, data-wise, Flutter is hoping to take it, convert that into UI, and then the user sees the UI that you declare. So obviously, like this is super cool because everything is hard-coded, right? But what if you want things to change? So the idea here, the basic example is state. Here we have two classes. So on the left-hand side is called counter widget, and it extends something called stateful widget. This is not stateless widget of the previous one, but stateful widget. And it creates another class. So it creates this class I called state. Not the best name, I get it. And this has one variable called counter, a counter. The build function returns text, and this is an interpolation, right? So this is converting an integer to a string, and it's going to return that number. Every single time this function increment counter is called, it increments the counter. This is plain code, but it calls something called set state, and that basically tells the Flutter framework that your widget has to be redrawn. So you'll be telling us you have to withdrawn. So if someone presses up and is increasing the counter, this is how we'll know, oh, something has changed, we need to redraw. You'll be doing this a lot. A couple of closing thoughts. Yeah, please go ahead.
When you said the state, is that inherited by all the children, like children widgets as well? Or
Good question. You asked, like, is state inherited or accessible by child widgets?
yeah.
The answer is not by default. By default, state is local to the widget that it's sent. So, like, your dumb example, your chat app might have some state, who the logged in user is. By default, you can put that in the header bar and write like my name is blah. If you want that accessible elsewhere in your app, there's different things you can do. I don't go through it in this presentation, but there's different ways you can provide it intentionally to the underneath you. You can also do fancier things with like event systems and listeners. The whole point is here that it all ends up being kind of code, so you can kind of do anything you want. But no, the answer is no by default. It's local to your widget. A good question. Okay, I'm going to give a couple of closing thoughts, and then if anyone else has questions. So one really cool thing, again, that I like about it and why I'm here is Flutter and Dart is open. So almost all of our development happens on GitHub. So if you have a GitHub account or want to create one, you can literally see how we're creating the Dart SDK. You can read the issues. You can see everyone on my team fight with each other in real time. It's really there. You can see how the Dart language wants to evolve. So there's a pretty healthy process there. People are talking about, oh, wouldn't it be great if the syntax worked this way? Wouldn't it be great if like you could write less, you would be able to do more things? All this being talked about in the open. And very similar for Flutter and the Flutter engine. So I think that's one really, really cool part compared to something like Xcode and Swift or even Android. It's very accessible. It's intended to be really easy to use and observe and contribute to. So I think that's really cool. There's also a lot of great resources for using Flutter because it's so popular and so big. The official website, flutter.dev/learn. There's a whole team of folks that works on maintaining links here and making sure there's great resources. The Reddit is actually surprisingly good. I don't like most parts of Reddit, but I think the Flutter subreddit is actually pretty helpful and pretty interesting most of the time. If you're used to another language, like you come from, like you've written an Android app, or you're more of a like C# person or something like that, we actually have a whole bunch of guides contributed by the community for, hey, I used to write C#. How do I map those concepts onto Dart? I used to write Android. I wrote an iOS app once. How do I map those concepts to Flutter? So I find this super, super useful. I reference it myself, and all this is for you. Cool. I think that's all I had, actually. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I think this was a very good sort of an overview of things. So obviously we will go more in depth into these things. But I think we can let Matan go and enjoy his evening after a long day of work and a presentation.
Yeah.
So, and then you will come back for...
Yeah, please invite me. I'd love to come back and see the projects as they're getting completed. That'd be super fun.
I think we would be very, very excited to have you come back.
Awesome. And I'm really proud of you all doing this, not because it's like our stuff, but app developed to me is really, really, like, it's super fun. So I'm hoping you have fun doing it. And one thing I would love to hear when I come back next time, if you run into something that doesn't make sense or doesn't work, like write it down somewhere for me, because I actually want to come back and hear about like, this didn't make sense to me, the documentation said this works and it doesn't. Something that happens when you work on a project for a number of years is you become like nose deaf. You know, like you don't smell your own farts. It's literally when you work on the same project for a really long time, it becomes hard to understand, stuff doesn't work. So all of you using it for the first time is really valuable to us. So please keep in mind what you think could be better. I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Okay, what time do we have? So I hope you found this useful, right? So now we can I'm just going to talk a little bit about the widgets on these slides that were put on it. And then for the rest of the class, what I want to do is that I'm hoping now everybody has the Flutter running and everybody has the Hello World app that can run with the device manager. Yes or no? No. Okay, we need to get it running. You have a Mac?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll help you in a minute. Anybody else that's not running? It's just one. Okay. What's happening? Okay, so just to cover a few of the things that that was talked about. So about the widgets, they are designed as immutable, okay? But then we talk about stateful widgets, which obviously change things. So what it means with the stateful, we'll come to that actually, sorry, we'll come to that. What it means with regard to the stateful widgets is the structure is immutable. But when the state changes, you need to call the set state to run it. I'll come to that in the next page. So it's basically a blueprint for a UI element, right? When you have UI elements like divs and H1s and paragraphs, etc. in web, they are UI elements which you directly have to put onto the onto your code in React, etc. Here, you do it declaratively. You just say, I want a text with these properties, and then the engine takes care of it. So you don't go to the UI element, but you're a declarative code. So then this idea about the widget tree, right? All the widgets are nested with each other. It's similar to the virtual DOM that React manages, right? Because in React, the widget tree, similar to widget tree, a tree is created in the virtual DOM, and then two virtual DOMs are compared, and then anything that's not, anything that needs to be repainted, then is transferred to the actual DOM in React, in the browser. Now, so from that point of view, they are similar, the way they run, but here is the most important part, and this is something to note. Between React and between the web and Flutter, you are hostage to the browser as to how your UI is rendered. Because at the end of the day, the browser's engine is interpreting how the pixels are painted on the screen. You don't have 100% control. Firefox does it a little bit differently, Safari does it a little bit differently, Chrome does it a little bit differently. But in Flutter, you have 100% control because it's the Flutter's engine that's painting the pixels on the screen, not the browser, not Apple's Swift background, etc. So that's the that's one of the important things about Flutter. Now, stateless widgets, they are the simplest kind, and they are immutable, and they don't have an internal state. Once it's created, it's just there. So for like text and other sort of static elements, you use it. They are reusable, and they are obviously very fast to compare, because whenever they are created, if they haven't changed, the widget tree doesn't have to think about, oh, was there a state, etc. There's none of these steps. It just goes through. Now, stateful widgets. In the stateful widget, the configuration is immutable. Okay? But it changes state. But then when it changes state, it needs to, you need to run the setState method to basically trigger a repaint of the UI. Okay? And a stateful widget therefore implements a method called createState. So a stateful, and for each stateful widget, without createState, you cannot. And the createState defines effectively the static UI element for that state, right? Stateful widget comes with a sort of a, let's say, a cookbook, okay? And the cookbook says, here is how you prepare that widget if something changes, okay? So that's the createState object. And so the mutable variables, they live inside the state object. So let's look at this one. I mean, it's similar to what Matan showed, with one difference about the name, okay? So the widget, the stateful widget is declared here, and then the createState method implementation is happening with this class. You know, name, number, state, extending the state class. So now, the thing is, this name, when I want to refer it from my state widget, because remember, the state widget is what builds the object, right? So this is effectively the quote-unquote the stateless widget that gets built, but with one difference, that this counter can change. And every time the counter change, we need to tell the widget tree, you need to repaint yourself. How do we tell the widget tree you need to repaint yourself? With the setState command. So if you did without the setState, so this is basically the build method. The build method has a container, and the container has a text in it. And we wrap it with a gesture detector. So gesture detector is a widget which can get a tap, right? So the gesture detector gets a tap, gets the tap, and the tap method of the gesture detector is to run the state. So, for example, the gesture detector tap method, the onTap method, takes a void function. So this is a void function. So you give it a void function like this, and parentheses, curly braces, and then inside it you give it what you want to run, and then setState is also a void function. So it requires a void function inside. So you give setState this void function. So up to here, from here to here is the void function that you give to setState. So, and when you increase the counter, therefore, with the tapping, right, in order for you to see it on the screen, the setState method has to be called so that it can redo the widget tree, go through the widget tree. So the name is immutable because it's a thing, and if I want to refer to it in my state widget, or state widget, I need to refer to it widget.name. So widget is a defined word for the state, okay? And it refers to this object. Okay, it refers to this class here, name number class, and to the name variable in the name variable. So whenever you want to refer to the external variable, the variable that's coming from the outside, we refer to it as widget.name. And the counter is again the internal variable that changes. Okay, any questions on this stateful widget? Okay, so we've gone over the stateful widget twice now. So hopefully this is, and then once we use it, we will get the hang of it. But this is one of the core things in Flutter to understand. Okay, so the last slide here before we give a quick break is the typical UI structure. So you call my app. You do it typically you do it as a stateless object, and the my app just calls is a widget that comes in, and it has a material app inside. Okay, so the material app has a few things. First of all, it has a theme. So the material app gets a theme object to do all the colors. That's one thing. The material app also has the routing. So it says, where am I going to go first? So it's the home page widget is the first thing that material app goes to, but material app also knows about other pages. And it has the mechanisms in its head about how to go to the other pages. Okay? And there is a few navigation methods. There's the default navigation method, but we're going to talk about Go Router. And Go Router is a really sort of thorough navigation system, which gives you also the flexibility to immediately port everything to web. So anyway, so this navigation thing is in the and then now you're coming to paint something on the screen. So when you're coming to paint on the screen, you can put a scaffold, but typically you put your scaffold inside another page widget, right? This is either a stateful widget or stateless widget, depending on how you want to do it. But these pages are going to be the main pages in your app, okay? And each page is going to contain a scaffold, which can have an up bar, can have a bottom nav bar, and then it will have a body. Now the body object, right? So you have the top bar, you have the bottom bar. The body can be, in most of the apps, it's a scrolling thing. But if you have an app where you just have, or you have a screen where you just go for the login, it's typically the login element is in the center of the screen. So if you have a login thing and you know that the screen they're going to give you, or the screen that your device is going to give you is not like this big. If you have a respectable screen, then what you can do is you can use a center object and put your login UI inside the center. But if you have a big list, which is going to be much bigger than the page, then you put into an object called single child scroll view. And single child scroll view, basically, it takes just one child. So, for example, a list view or a column or something, but then it allows you to scroll between the up bar and the bottom bar, okay? So that's sort of the rough structure about a page. So what we're going to talk about is in the next section, what I want to do is I want to just basically go through doing things live, and then once we have everything here, I'm going to push it to GitHub to the repository, which you will be able to then come down. But we will play with some of these ideas. Okay. So what time do we have? Before we break, I want to just show you one more thing. So the extensions, right? So you should install the Dart and Flutter extension. That's absolutely necessary in VS Code. And what these things give you is the ability to also run the launch.json file. Okay, so you can create a launch.json file, and then when you have a launch, for example, let's say you're developing an app, you have a Firebase and everything that's a mock or a development environment with all the database and so on, and then you have the production environment. You have two environments, and each environment has their own Firebase connections, database connections, whatever you have, right? So then all these initialization routines, they come into the main.dart. You can do that in the main.dart. The rest of the code doesn't care about all these initialization things. The rest of the code is the same. But you can just separate at the main.dart level. And for the development environment, you can call main.dev.dart. For the production environment, you can call main.prod.dart. Then these two things, app.dev and app.prod, are going to appear in your compile launch dropdown. And you can easily run the main.prod and main.dev. And these two files, you will not be touching on a regular, they are just set up files. And then if you're going to need to set up something else, you do it, but you would typically not touch them. But this gives you the ability, among a lot of other things. So the Flutter snippets, you should install this as well. And what that gives you is that once you write stat, it gives you a drop-down of the various boilerplate code for stateful widget or stateless widget, etc., or stateful builder in that case. A lot of other things. That is very important to have. I may have this already on Canvas, but anyway, you'll have these links to the thing. Now, this is a very important extension, okay? And what this does is that you create, for example, you create a person, has a first name, last name, age, address, etc. A few properties. So that's a class. You create that as a class. You just define those things. But then, what you need is that if you're debugging code, you want to print that person quickly and to see which person you're talking about, right? So it needs a toString method. So it implements automatically a toString method, this thing. So without you having to write it. It creates also a toMap and fromMap methods. Okay, maybe some of you have used this thing because this is not just for Dart, it has for other codes as well. Then the toJSON from JSON, if you are parsing data from JSON, these methods are necessary for that class. CopyWith method, so if you want to replicate an object with slightly different parameters, the CopyWith method. And most important, this equality operator. So the equality operator for a class, it needs to go and check every member, right, whether they are equal or not. So for a string, you have the equality operator defined. String 1, string 2, the equality operator makes sense. But if I have a person, which is a class, what is it? What is the equality operator? How do you define it? So it defines that in some way, or at least it creates that, which you can then manipulate. But all the boilerplate code comes from this this one. Now, the last one, we haven't come to that yet. You can install it now or later. Is the block library. So even before block library, up to here, this is just Flutter extensions. So when you right-click on a widget, because everything is like all the widgets are always wrapped over each other, when you right-click on a widget, it will give you with all these widgets that you can wrap it with. Let's say you're in a container and you have a little text. All of a sudden, you need a little bit of padding to it. You put right-click on the text, and then there comes padding. You say wrap with padding. Immediately, you get a padding over the text. You have, you've written text in the scaffold, in the body. You just written text, and you want to center it. You just wrap it with center. You go. And similarly, these ones, the block builders and so on, this will come later. They are a little bit more code. Unlike the Flutter snippets, which gives you a boilerplate code, this one actually wraps your code in it, so it puts the brackets, etc., all in the right place. Okay, so that's those are the extensions that I think you should all have. This file is going to be in your canvas to see. All right, let's give a 10-minute break to what time is it? 8:06. Okay, 8:15. Let's get back here at 8:15 and continue. And Priya, right? All right. So what do we have? What is this? What ID is this? But online. Is it? Is it? Yeah. Where did all this come from?
我需要的是那个补全名字，那我不需要补全名字，因为看我补全那个东西，我还换行。
他也必须给我搞这些东西。对，我觉得应该是他装 extension。对，不需要他那么装。
我想要补全名字，因为那个 offset 只要他把它写上了，它就是很长的一条嘛。
那之前你有 unblock 吗？
啊，
这个
没有。
之前没安。
哦，安了。
我觉得应该是他的问题。
我要手动的把它选中然后删掉。
Yes.
I just want to
写一个 button thing，然后我摁了这个 button thing 之后，它把这个写上去。然后，但是我其实最后我需要回到这个地方，我想按这个，我还得回到这个，就是这个 end， 还得摁着，往下再这样，然后再这样，我就。
哦，你说要整格式。
Okay.
就是
是
我对，就是我希望要把它补上的时候，他帮我写成就是刚才那个样子，否则的话写在这里，万一就是它的那个变量很多的话，就拖长条。
哦，是这样。我以为是他补的，就是你想要啊。
我觉得
如果他补的不是你想要的，
因为
他必须
还
要
有时间，我还要去到这个，他补完之后嘛，他得上他就是选中这些东西，然后删掉。
So what is this Flutter?
我没找到里面有 format 这个。
但是可能可以搜一下。
Oh, you put the Flutter directory there. Okay, so this is where Flutter lives. So you want to. Yeah, because this is the main Flutter code. So you want to create
对，然后就可以点这个，下这个，然后你可以，哦，你的 Android，这个 Android Studio，有 Android Studio。
我随便去找了一个什么 children 那个例子。
Okay, so now we have a development directory. Okay, we have a development directory, and we're going to do our projects here. So, for example, what I will do now, you want to look at, so it's a development directory, and what I will do is Flutter create. Let's call it lecture 4. Okay, today's lecture.
Before, so you have to go to that where the environment, your path.
Yeah, can you go to the download page again?
Yeah. Yeah, so that would you have to go to the page.
Doesn't she have to do the path?
Yeah, I did the path, so finally I got
Where
figured it out.
Here.
Yeah.
But it's Windows.
YouTube playlist
Just doesn't know where it is.
7%
that Flutter folder.
No. It just doesn't know.
ಇದೇ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಅದು.
So this is your path. It doesn't know about Flutter. So just search for add Flutter to my path. Can you do it? Yes.
So after I created the
Okay, so you go to here, click on that. Now click on
Safari tab Figma options.
that's the Android device.
add this, change this to the so please go to to access that Android Studio I installed. No, you don't have to just under the
No, you don't need to create that.
Individual అంటే నేనే 3 పేర్లు
Keep looking at your screen, I'm sorry. But,
వెనకాల కోడ్ డైరెక్ట్ డ్రాగ్ అండ్ డ్రాప్ కోడ్ బిల్డర్ విజెట్స్ కలర్ కోడ్ లేలేము
చూసాను
ఎంత డ్రాగ్ అండ్ డ్రాప్ అంటే చచ్చిపోతాను చేయలేక
So can you type that here? This thing, but with the correct directory for your Flutter.
Where's the correct
No, it's the Flutter slash. You see, this is the Flutter directory. So it's a download client something. Flutter bin.
Where
So
did you put the Flutter?
yeah, so you have to come up to the Flutter and then slash bin slash. But where are you opening this? Don't open it.
हाँ बढ़िया सुबह
Yeah, and I say that.
Now to save it. Control X. It's control X you have to type. And then yes.
File name.
No, just return. Okay, so now say source space dot zshrc dot z dot source
हाँ तो वही लेना पड़ेगा मैं कहाँ ना बोलूँ
source
బ్రేక్ అయిపోలేదా
source yeah dot zshrc that's it.
iOS చేయగల కదా iPadOS లో వాట్సాప్ లేదు నిజంగా
Just kill the serial.
iPad అంటే ఇస్తాడు మన
అది ఈజీ కాదు ఒక క్లయింట్స్ కోడ్ విజెట్లు కూడా చేయలేదు ప్రొడక్షన్ లెవెల్ పిక్సెల్ ప్యాకేజ్ కూడా డౌన్లోడ్ చేయొచ్చు ఎలా ఉంటుందో
इसमें दो प्लेयर खत्म करना है
నావిగేట్ ఎలా అవుతుందో
मतलब काउंट करना होगा या अलग है
కొత్త ఫోన్ కొంటాను ఇస్తాను నా ఫోన్ ఏంటి బాధ
इसका
మనకి బ్యాటరీ చెప్తాను
और फिर
ఐఫోన్
मेरे को इसका
యాప్ డెవలప్మెంట్ చేస్తున్నాను సెకండ్ ఐఫోన్ కదా ఎందుకు అప్పుడే కొడుతున్నా
सॉफ्टवेयर मशीन
అది కూడా ఇంకా ఫ్లటర్ కొట్టాడు తెగిగా ఏ కూడా ఇస్తలేదు చక్కగా ఇందాక ట్రై టైప్ చేస్తా జేఎస్ టైప్ చేస్తా జేఎస్ కదా డాట్ విజిట్ బై విజిట్ కొడతా అలా
फास्ट पीरियड के लिए कौन सा पार्ट देखना है 23 24
जीसीपी చేయాలి జీसीपी AWS AWC
So we have it now.
ఇది
So
ఫైర్
now,
క్లౌడ్ కనెక్ట్ చేయడానికి ఇదేదో ఇవాళ లాస్ట్ క్లౌడ్ కనెక్ట్ ఏదైనా ఫైర్ బేస్ కదా 100 ఐఎస్కి ఏముంటుంది ఎక్స్కోడ్ అయితే రేపు క్లాస్ నేను ఎక్స్కోడ్లో పైథాన్ రన్ చేస్తాను అంతే
现在我有它的案例一下这个
క్లాస్ పిల్లకి వచ్చేలా లేదు అందరికి వచ్చింది
so it's not working. So you need to, now from VS Code, you need to open this folder, right? Not Flutter. You never touch Flutter folder, ever. All right. Okay, if you can go to your terminal, okay? You can go to your terminal and go to the top level folder where you want to keep all these projects related to this class. So you should have a folder with, at the top level folder, I mean, I call it CSEN 268, and then you, we will there create today's lecture as a project, okay? So the way I create it is in the terminal, I say Flutter create, let's call it lecture 4. And hopefully everybody is gonna get this created. The next thing is I go to VS Code. Is it okay? Can I move? Continue. Has anybody? Okay. All right. VS Code. New window. Open. And in the development CSEN 260 lecture 4. So now in VS Code, I've opened that template project. Do it, please. How are you doing? So then click on this bottom corner to bring up the devices. Yeah.
Inside the Flutter or no?
Which one?
Top level
No, you should be completely away from Flutter directory. Where the code is, you should be never touching it, never opening that. So put it down. Okay, so this is the Flutter SDK. You don't want to touch this.
But he has Pixel. Wait.
Okay. All right. So you created now. There is a directory called CSEN. You can do it.
Is the emulator supposed to be?
Okay or not? Okay.
Professor, is the emulator supposed to be Pixel, or can it just be like the Android and like medium phone?
It can be Android medium phone. The only thing is if you went to the Android Studio, so this Android medium phone is, I think, a generic one. You can use that, I think. But what I've done is I've gone to Android Studio Device Manager and created a specific phone. So let's quickly look at that. So Android Studio, Tools, here I have the Device Manager. So from Tools, you select Device Manager. In Device Manager, I have these two devices, and I can add a device, create a virtual device. And I can select what device I want. I can create a tablet, I can create a fold, etc.
Which one would you recommend?
I mean, I like the Pixel 7 or Pixel 8, either one, like the regular phone, because that's the most, because I don't know what that Android medium phone does. This is a real device. I mean, the size of the real device. Okay. Okay, so you will select, I will select the Pixel 7 for this case, doesn't matter. Already has some stuff inside. Okay, can we move on? Right, so now I have here opened my, let me just close this Android Studio. So I have now here my VS Code, my emulator, and obviously where I go is the main.dart. Okay, and to run it, when I click on Run and Debug, it says there is no configuration, right? Because it doesn't have configuration file. You can just select the Dart and Flutter here for the running. And it's running now. And don't forget, what it's actually doing in the background is it's actually compiling with Android Studio. Right? It's actually compiling with Android Studio. If you're building a iOS app, it's compiling with the Xcode. Okay? So it's that. Okay, so this is our app, and this is so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of these comments. Okay. So, so we've already gone through this stuff, right? So there is the
这里啊，哦
main dot, the main function, which is getting called from with the launcher, and it says run app my app. So it basically starts with this stateless widget. The stateless widget builds something, right? The build method of the widget actually builds the thing, and then it builds a material app which has theme data, and it also has a destination. So the home destination, it needs to be given to the material theme, material app, so that it knows which widget to paint. Yes?
Just, can you zoom in a bit?
Is that better? So, so the material app is better, and then it basically says, go and build my home page. Okay? So now the thing is, for a good coding practice would be what? Would it be nice to have the home page in the same main.dart, or what should I do?
Some files. Its separate file.
It should have its own separate file, right? So basically, I go to the file directory here inside the lib, and what I can do is, for example, I can say, okay, pages. Okay, and inside pages, I can create. Let's for now just create inside the pages something called homepage.dart. So the file naming in Dart we do with this underscore type, and we name files like this, and the objects we name like this. Or this was called my homepage, but doesn't matter. We'll change it. So. Okay, so you do that. So we created this empty file. I'll go back to main.dart. Okay, and this was my home page. I'm now changing the name to, actually, it's better I change this name. Okay, so this is my home page, this class. I'm going to copy and put it here. So this my home page is giving me a bunch of errors. Okay? And in order to fix those errors, I can just go on this error and do command dot. I can do command dot in Mac OS. In Windows, I don't know. So you go on the error and you do command dot, and it should give you this this list. And what we will import is material.dart. Okay, let's have a look at the errors. Everything is gone. I can save this. Okay? For questions? All right, then I go to main.dart. Now it's complaining it doesn't know about my home page. Right? Because obviously we just created that file and it doesn't know. So again, I do command dot, and then it gives you this either in relation to the project lib directory or in absolute. I mean, I generally do it absolute, but I think the other one would work as well. So now it doesn't it doesn't complain. Everything is fine, and now I have a sort of a nice structure in my app that I have a pages directory, and I'm going to put all the pages in there. Now, let's create a text with a background. Okay, let's create a text with a background. But the way I want to create the text with a background is I want to create a container, put the text in it, give it a bit of a padding, and that will be my widget. And for that, you can organize your life as you wish. But the way I do it is I create a widgets directory. Okay? I create a widgets directory, and the widgets that I'm going to use, they are not pages, they are like little widgets that I'm going to use. I want to develop them inside this widgets directory. And here, I want to create an object called padded text.dart. Okay, so I'm creating a file called padded text.dart. Okay, because I have the snippets library, I can just say STA, and it gives me in the drop-down all the options that I have to do things. And I'm going to build, if it's a container with a little bit of a padding and a text in it, then it's a stateless object. So I'm going to select stateless object here. And I have a stateless widget, and I have a stateless widget. Okay? Boilerplate. Now, it's very complaining. But before you fix the complainings, which is the squiggly reds, you need to give it the name, because it's already pre-selected the name for you for the two places, for the constructor and for the class as well. And we call it padded text. And do you see why it already took the name padded text automatically? It suggested the padded text because of the file name. So you didn't have to write the padded text in that, capital format. It automatically got you. So now we fixed the name of the thing. The squigglies. What do I need to do to fix the squigglies? Command dot on the squiggly, okay. But what do we expect to come?
Import.
But which one? Material. So all this stuff about the widgets, all this stateless widget, build, context, etc., all of that is in the material.dart library, and we always need to put that into the thing. Okay? So when you create a stateless widget, the thing it gives you by default is an empty container. Okay? So now the container, so if you go over the container with your cursor, it gives you all the things it can take. Okay? So, what do these, who knows what these things mean, the question mark?
They're
So we
nullable.
haven't, huh?
He said that they were nullable, so you can just pass not null.
Exactly. So when a variable is defined with a question mark in the end, you can pass a null value. If it's not, then you cannot pass a null value. It has to either have a default value, which is in the case of the clip behavior. So the clip behavior is clip none for container is the default value. Of course, you can send another thing, but what you cannot do is you cannot send a null for the clip behavior. Okay? But you can even send a child as null. Okay? So you can, then it will be an empty container somehow. Okay. So the container, now the child, I want the child to be a text object. Right? But there's a bit of complaining there. The blue line is a suggestion. Red line is a real problem, right? So it's complaining about something. So let's look at what it's complaining. I mean, this may be a little bit too basic for some of you, but maybe for some of you it's useful. I don't know. If it's too basic, we can just go faster. You tell me. Is it fine? Okay. So then we go to the squiggly line. So let's look at the text. Text has all the parameters in the curly. All the parameters inside the curly are called named parameters. So if I'm going to send style, the way I send it is style colon something. But everything outside the curly, I send as a positional parameter. Okay? So named parameter and a positional parameter. Positional parameter is, it could be one or many, but it basically you need to supply all of them in that position. But the named parameters, typically the way you do is that you can do, if it's a very common one, you would put this as a position parameter so that you don't write all the time. When you're writing a text, you don't write all the time text object with the text property equals blah, blah. You just send the text property and then it takes it as the string data. The other ones are optional. So therefore, we need to give it a text. So let's for now write hello world. Okay. Now, let's quickly look at the complaining for the blue. It's complaining that, it's better if you call it a const, because if it's a const, then it saves me, memory, etc., etc. So this is a suggestion, the blue one, it says here. We don't need to worry about it now. Later with, the Dart analyze and Dart fix, we can fix all of these things in a bulk. You don't need to worry about it at the moment. Okay, so now we have this padded text, and the thing is, the padded text doesn't take an input. It now puts out a predefined thing. But let's see how we can put it into the project. So the padded text is a widget which I want to use in my home page, right? And it's a simple widget that just says hello world. There is no padding yet or anything. So I go to my home page, and in my home page, in the center, right, there is this column. The column has this, you've pushed the button this many times, and then the counter. Okay? Let's, for example, on top of it, as the first element in that list, because the column takes children as an object. Instead of a child, it takes children as an object, which is a list of widgets. Okay? It's a list of widgets. It takes children, so the column takes children. And the first object, I can say it's padded text. And padded text has no arguments, but it's complaining. What do I need to do? I go on top of it and command dot. Now, I'm going to get the padded text in. Okay, now no more complaining. But I haven't saved it yet. I haven't saved the file yet, so it didn't trigger a reload. Is everybody done this step?
Wait, how did you get rid of the error on padded text?
Command dot on it,
Okay.
and then you should get the reference to the widget. Because we created the widget here, it only knows it there, yeah? Okay, so now let's save it. And as we can see, hello world just appeared here. Yeah? So now let's go back to our padded text and make a few changes. For example, what I want to do is I want to pass a string to this thing so that I can do different strings. Okay, so final, right? It's an immutable class. Final, let's call it text. Sorry, final string text. Okay? We've defined this. Now it's complaining. Why is it complaining?
You know how to initialize text.
You have to initialize text, but also it's complaining that we haven't, we need to fix the constructor. So we go on the padded text again, do a command dot. On the padded text, it says add final field formal parameters, right? So this is basically, it needs to get the constructor. Now you notice something required. So text is immutable for this origin. Once it goes in, it's immutable. It needs a value, right? But it doesn't have a default value. So if it doesn't have a default value, what do? We say required. Okay? So you cannot call padded text without this named parameter. And again, this is inside the curly brackets. It's inside the curly brackets, so this is a named parameter. So the way we call padded text is padded text parentheses text colon and a string. So already before I save it, what happened to my home page? What happened to my home page? I can see from the background my home page is starting to complain. Okay? So let me save this widget and let me go and make attention to my home page. Now my home page is complaining that the named parameter text is required, right? So my home page is saying the name parameter text is compiled. Okay, but before I fix that, I go back to my padded text because even though we are requesting this text string, we haven't actually used it. So let's use it inside here. So now that the text widget is going to be driven by that string text that I'm giving it. I save this, and I go to my home page. Now I can give it a text property, a string. It could be an empty string. It's not null. It's an empty string. But I can say, okay. So now I've created a reusable object, a widget. It's sitting in my widget directory. So when you're doing your app, the various cards and so on and so forth, everything you do, push them down into widgets directory and create them there and keep them there. And then once you change something in them, everywhere in the code it will be changed. The thing is, we don't have a padding in it. Let's quickly go and add padding. So I also want to get a final, let's call double padding. Okay, I'm back to my padded text widget. I'm adding a double padding to it. And again, it starts complaining because it needs the constructor, right? And it will again have to be with the required parameter. But for padding, it could be better if I have a default value. I mean, when I'm putting an object on the screen, the text is going to change all the time, but it's better if I have a default padding value so that I don't have to write padding every time, right? So the way I do that is so in the constructor, I went now, instead of saying required, I'm just saying send me the padding. If not, I'm going to use 8. That's what I'm saying, right? Send me the padding number. If not, I'm going to use 8. So now the padding goes, one more thing. In the Dart, what do you call linting or whatever, if you put a comma here, comma to everything, it will do it will make it very readable. So if I put a comma here, it will make it very readable. Now on the container, let's see where the padding goes. so there is a padding property in the container, and we need to fill that padding property somehow. So padding, and then what kind of an object does it get? It gets an edge insets geometry object. I don't know what that is. Now, when I start typing edge, it already gives me all the various things that sort of like is this edge insets object. So all of these things are edge insets object. Let's try to understand what they mean. Now, edge insets.all is basically putting padding all around the same. Edge insets from LTRB, basically from left, top, right, bottom. So you give left, top, right, bottom 4 numbers, the LTRB. From view padding, we'll come to that later. Only means you can say, just give me top padding of 2, but don't worry about the other paddings. Symmetric means horizontal and vertical, they are the same paddings. So you can play with those things, but what we're going to do now is just edge insets of all, and it just takes a value, and the value we're going to give it is padding. The padding value that we got in the top is what we're giving here. Now, I've added the parameter, but my home page is not complaining. Is that expected? When we put text, my home page was complaining. Now my home page is not complaining. Who can tell me why?
Because it's not required.
It's not required, and therefore the home page, the way the padded text is used in the home page is without the padding, but because it's not required, home page doesn't have anything to complain. Okay, we save that, and in the home page, let's make this because you may have noticed this welcome to lecture 4 has just gone up a little bit. So it was probably much closer here, and then it should have gone up by 8 pixels. Okay, so let's give it a padding of 40. It jumped. Okay. So if you change the padding, you will see that this thing is moving, because now, although we don't see, we have something here and something there. How can I see what is there? What should I do to see what is there? I'm designing this, I'm playing with this, and I really want to see, where is this coming from? Why is this coming from? Is it from there? What would be a quick trick for me to see how big, what is there?
Can you inspect the DOM?
Yes, you can expect the DOM, but more visual. Huh? Well, you can inspect it, but I want to see visually, I want to see visually this thing, because this is a container with a transparent background.
Can you fill the background?
Exactly. So one quick trick is to fill the background. So let me go to palette checks and say color. Okay, now when I save it, I see this object. This is a quick trick for you to see what we're doing on the screen. So this one has all this padding around. Okay? Yeah, so what have we done today? I think we have 5 minutes. But what we've done today is we've learned how to create a widget. We've learned how to create widget with parameters that are required, parameters that are optional with a default value. Okay, we've seen how to how to do the structure of our code. Sort of, we're starting to see how to structure our code, and we have to really go on from here. so the stateful widget mechanics, we're going to play more in the next lecture. In the next lecture, we're also going to do more about layout and columns and all these things. But I'm going to push this up to Git. I haven't done the last lecture video and this one. I'm going to push them up as well to the thing. But any questions so far? Yes?
What was the const keyword about that you kept suggesting to add it?
So the const keyword is this. For example, so here, the reason it's complaining is not about const keyword. It's basically saying syntactically, it looks better if there is a child object. It sits at the very bottom of the thing. In this case.
Oh, in that case, okay.
So I can do command. I don't know anyway, so basically you can just cut and paste and bring it here. Okay? So here, now this is gone. But go back to my home page.
Yes.
It's complaining about this padded text, welcome to lecture 4, padding 40, etc. It's complaining all about it. And this is basically saying it's constant. Right? The thing is, once I compile this code, this thing is not going to change at all. Like the padded text construct there is not going to change at all. Why don't you make it a constant so that it's constantly compiled? Because I don't have to build anything to it. So I can say const. But it's not complaining about this one, right? It's not complaining about this text because this text, the data, can change. And because it can change, if you put constant in front of it, it'll say, come on. So that's why you can put constant. But as I said, the constant thing is important, but is also not that important. You know, it can be fixed in a bulk with the analyze, etc. But I think this is a good time to stop. I mean, I hope everybody followed today with their code and, you know, got a little bit sort of a feel for the thing, right? And I mean, as Matan was saying, I think it doesn't get any easier than this to start developing an app, right? I mean, it's very intuitive, it's very clean. Okay. So one more thing. Have you guys been able to get the student version of Figma? So it's in the homework instructions for assignment 2. You can go to Figma website. There's a link, and with your SCU ID, you can say, I'm using Figma for my course. Give me the full package, not just the restrictive one. Full package, and it has a lot of good features. So I've done it for myself. But if you want to do it, it's not bad idea to do it, because otherwise I don't know how you can submit your code. So you should do it, because I won't be able to see your link unless you put me onto the project and grade it. Okay?
Figma, you said?
Figma, yes. So if you look at the homework assignment 2, the instructions are there. I put it there. But for free, you get a really nice app anyway. I mean, the Figma app with full features. It also has code generation for Flutter. It's not perfect, but it has code generation. So you draw things and then it generates the Flutter code for you. Okay. Thank you. See you on Tuesday.
Stop this, huh?
Yes. No, I think don't. I mean, I don't think we'll have to. 1 or 2 I'll put up on the screen.